Coffee, Calm and Connection is about being human. It's about you choosing to prioritize your well-being, putting the time in to strengthen your resilience to adversity, and being part of a community that holds you accountable and offers support when the going gets tough. Our podcasts bring expert insight and real-life experiences together for you to enjoy and learn what it is that makes us human and how to work with it. Good afternoon, Faye. Thank you for joining me today on Coffee, Calm and Connections podcast. It's fabulous to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Sarah.
We've done a couple of podcasts together, haven't we?
We have,
From our other hats, different businesses, but I always enjoy chatting to you. So I wonder if you will give the Coffee, Calm Connection listeners a little bit of background about who is Faye.
Yes. Good. So I am, professionally, I am UK country manager for Zywave. So we are a tech business that focuses on working with insurance brokers. And I've been in this role itself probably for the last 2 years, and with this company for the last 8. I am a mother of a 4, nearly 5-year-old little boy. I live in Derbyshire. I am, probably a bit of a workaholic, to be honest. I would describe myself. I'm very kind of passionate about what I do, and it is on my mind a lot, which is, I think, it has its ups and downs to being that kind of person, I think. But I am constantly looking for ways to balance out, and just like really interested in having this conversation today as well, because also I like coffee, and I think being calm is important, and having connections is also key. So.
You could have just described me in that I also like coffee. Cheers. I'm also very much enjoy what I do, and perhaps borderline workaholic.
Yeah.
And I have 3 children, and my little boy is a similar age to yours. So we have a lot of similarities. First question that jumps out at me from what you've just said: how do you balance the mum and the work?
The answer to that is I'm still figuring it out. I don't have the answer. I think that it is constantly a learning process, and I've made loads of mistakes along the way, and then I kind of course correct and try different things. The pandemic situation, lockdown, and when kind of schools and childcare went away, that really taught me that I can't be both at the same time. I can't be a great mum and great at my job in the same minute. So I think it's knowing that you have to kind of focus on one or the other, and obviously, make sure your kids are taken care of course. But for me, I am, 100% focused on my son, the weekend, in the evenings, etc. But when I'm working, but also it's about, I think, having the flexibility to know that kind of there'll be curveballs coming, so allow for that. Don't stress too much when it happens. I try not to beat myself up probably as much as I used to about working and not necessarily being there at the school gates at 3:15 or 3:30 as it is right now, like other mums that I would think, they're much better mothers than I am because they're always there for their children, whereas I might be using after school club, or my parents might be picking him up or something along those lines. So it's I think it's just a case of not being too critical of myself and knowing that you can't be everything every minute.
Do you know, I think you've said something there that was resonated with me, and you said it, the perfect mum, or that comparison that we do. And I think probably women do it more than men. Maybe I might be wrong there. I'm not a man, so I can't speak for them. But my sort of probably most of my struggles come from that comparison. And I will always compare myself with the stay-at-home mum in terms of my mothering abilities, with the CEO of a large corporate in terms of my business capabilities, with a yoga teacher in terms of my flexibility capabilities, and with a Michelin star chef in terms of my non-existent cooking capabilities. And you can just never win. Why do we do that?
Yeah, it is. It's I guess it's the seeking to be the best we can and perfectionism. And, if you are ambitious, then certainly you're going to want to strive to achieve success in as many areas of your life as possible. But when you look at people like the perfect mum, the Michelin star chef, you don't know what else is going on in their lives anyway. And a lot of it as well is about, I think, as being overly critical in our minds of what we're doing, when actually externally we're doing a great job. It's just that voice in your head, isn't it?
You sound like you've come to a very wise sort of state of being. How? What lessons have you learned? What sort of points in your life can you recall as being learning areas?
Yeah, so actually that's a fair question. A few years ago, went through quite a big life change where I had some quite hard personal stuff happening to me. And I made a decision around that time to kind of just loosen my grip a little bit and stop trying to control everything. And also around that time, I would say, quite down, as in unhappy. I'd recently had my son as well, and I wasn't diagnosed with postnatal depression, but when I read about it now and I read about symptoms, I do think there was some of it there potentially. So around that time, like when I was at my very lowest, I remember just thinking to myself one morning, I need to make some changes here and just focus on finding a way to be happy every day. Like, that's my objective. And I started to kind of just take little steps to kind of, I guess, find things that make me happy, find activities that make me happy, and stop worrying about things going wrong, about failure and so on, being more present in the moment, all that kind of, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. I also, as I was going through that, got into listening to a lot of kind of podcasts that were more spiritual focused, which I think was a massive help for me, because the whole idea, if you look at kind of spirituality, is that there are, bigger things outside of us. And if you start to look at the world in that way, you realize that you don't need to try and control everything. And that causes a lot of stress, I think, for people. I got some help as well, kind of therapeutic and counselling help as I was going through that, which again kind of helped me to just look at the world in a slightly different way. And one of the biggest things professionally as I was going through this, I decided I was just going to be myself. And certainly in my role, which is quite sales focused, I looked back and I thought, I've been trying to be a 60-year-old man for the last 10 years, because these are my target customers. I've been trying to write emails like them and talk like them and act like them and have rapport like them. And I'm not a 60-year-old man. So I decided, as well as I was going through all of this, that I'm just going to be myself. And if people like me, they like me. If they don't, they don't. And that was probably a big change for me, because I found that I made better connections with people. I felt more authentic. And yeah, it's been, I think I allowed myself as well, or I accepted I was going to make mistakes in life in general. And that's absolutely fine, because you make a mistake, you learn. That's how you succeed, isn't it? So it's like welcoming the idea that mistakes are going to happen, so that you can kind of let go of that stress and free yourself up. So yeah, I think that's a bit of an all over the place answer, but
it's not. It's absolutely fabulous, and I think there's so many. Like, I thought of about 1,000 questions for you just in that in what you've said, because I think it's so helpful. If I can just give you an anecdote of something to frame my question. I have read a book which I'm sure many people have read, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things that Stephen Covey says in that book is about sort of the aha moment, right? And sometimes the aha moment comes in a split second, and sometimes you have to cultivate it. And the example he gives is he's riding on the subway in New York or wherever, and a man gets on with 2 kids, and the kids are going free for all wild, climbing, yelling, and this guy's just sitting and doing nothing. And you can feel the vibe of people getting irritable. And Stephen takes it upon himself to go to this guy and say, "Excuse me, sir, but your kids are running wild. Do you think you might control them because they're upsetting a lot of people?" And the feeling, the thoughts, the behaviours are all coming from a place of irritation. What are you doing? Why are you not looking after your kids? And what the guy says is, "I'm sorry, we've just come from the hospital where their mum's just died."
Yeah.
Massive aha change. It changes the way you think about this man and his children and the situation. It changes how you feel about this man, the children, the situation, and it changes your behavior towards the man and his situation. And cognitive behavioral therapy is all around this thought, feeling, behavior sort of triangle. What I often never get to the bottom of, and one of the questions I have is, those aha moments are relatively few and far between, and the cultivating change takes so much more, and you have to live and breathe the change in an incremental and consistent way for a really long time before it becomes who you are. And that really long time is where things fall out. You sound like you've done that really well. How? What were there any aha moments, or was it conscious and daily fight to get to where you want to be?
Yeah, I think that there are lots of little aha moments that probably are where things aren't going great and you notice it, and I notice how I'm reacting to things and that I'm not feeling that good. And then once I have that, that's my aha moment. And then I return to a practice of what I've been doing before, that's kind of, it's like constant course correction. And as time passes, I notice it more quickly. So perhaps historically, I think of, like, if we think of something like work examples. So when I was in my 20s, I used to be an event manager, and that is quite a stressful job. And I remember I was good at it, but I remember like working insanely long hours and being tired and stressed and getting upset, and like one tiny thing would go wrong and it like pushed me over the edge, and I didn't have the resilience or the tool set at that point in my life to be able to kind of bounce back from that, or not let it deeply get to me as I think that I do now. So it's kind of been for me a process of knowing these, problems happen, and being able to have this toolkit that I can quickly kind of dip into to get me back to where I want to be, like grounded and calm. But also I think allow, at the same time, if something isn't going great, acknowledging that it's okay to feel stressed, pissed off, unhappy, upset, and actually allowing those feelings to hang around as they need to, and then letting them pass, like feeling them and letting them pass. It's just practice, and it's also like a lot of learning, I think, about it as well in myself and externally.
2 things you said there that I think are interesting. One is this idea of course correction. I visualize it as walking on a tightrope, which probably tells you something about how uptight I am. And like, I don't feel like I'm on the tightrope. I feel like I'm more often than not off one side or another. And I literally just jump over the tightrope every so often. But perhaps for my own sort of incremental thinking is, if I change that from a tightrope to a path, you fall off it less because it's wider, and that allows for a bit of mistakes. I'm quite visual, so I like one of the things that I might try and do is every time I visualize, oh, you've fallen off the tightrope again, I'm going to change it to a pathway. So thank you for that. And the other thing that you said that I think is really interesting, really, really interesting, and I love it, is that your aha moment is in noticing where you're at. That is so powerful. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Coffee Calm Connection, and one of the personal values I've got in driving Coffee Calm Connection, is to support people to notice their own patterns. So when you notice you've gone back into that spiral maybe that doesn't help, you notice it before you've fallen off the tightrope or the pathway, and while you're still on it, for you to be able to course correct. And obviously I'm not in any way medical or psychological, so this is as much a journey for me as it is for everybody that's coming along on the CCC journey. So I think that's really, really interesting. One of the other things that you mentioned at the beginning was that you went through a life-changing circumstance. And what I want to ask you is, when you've got a structure and a way, a pattern to life, and that structure's taken away, and I'm thinking about your life-changing circumstance, but I'm also thinking about the pandemic and what that's done. How do you cope with that? Because all of a sudden you're plunged into a world of uncertainty, and uncertainty and control go hand in hand to create sometimes quite a negative feeling in myself. How?
Yeah, I think the more you try to control things when you're in an uncertain situation, the harder it becomes. So for me, I think it's kind of just looking at the situation and allowing, I guess, is one way, and trying to flow with it a bit, as opposed to an analogy that I got years ago, actually, when I was going through this kind of rougher time, is not trying to swim upstream and trying to find ways to flow. Find the path of least resistance, and if you see the path of least resistance, take it. If it's if it feels like that's what you should be doing, then take it. Don't try and hold yourself to this. If we look at something like the pandemic, I've got to work X hours a day. These are the expectations on me. I've got to be the best at this, this, and this. Whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. I think just kind of giving yourself a bit of a break is important. Again, I've kind of said a lot there. I don't know if I've really hit that question.
No, you absolutely have. And you use the word expectation. And I've long held this belief, which may or may not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway, that choice can lead to a significant amount more anxiety and negativity. So the more choices you're presented with, the more room there is for angst.
Yeah.
And I had a really interesting conversation with my dad the other day, and he had read a book, and I can't remember what the name of the book is, but if I remember it, I'll put it in the show notes of this podcast. And it's Sapiens.
Yeah, okay.
So I keep meaning to read Sapiens and never getting to it, but he'd read Sapiens, and what the ethos that he took from it was that everybody has within certain parameters the same amount of serotonin and dopamine, and I might be getting the hormones wrong, and please don't troll me if I have, but essentially the happy hormones that make you happy or sad. So if you are a caveman living in a hovel and fearing for your life because of all of the lions around, you still have the same amount of dopamine or what happy hormones, let's call them that, happy hormones, as I do, or you do, or I don't know, people on the other side of the continent do, people from lower income brackets to high, we all have the same amount. And therefore this idea that money makes you happier is incorrect, which I think is probably fairly accepted nowadays.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is that the differential is expectation. So the caveman living in the hovel has an expectation at which he performs in his day-to-day lives, and it's a lower expectation than I would have. I do not expect to live in a hovel and be chased down by lions or have to fight for food, and therefore my expectation leaves more room for more angst and negativity, and I should have and I could have, and why not, and this is not fair and that's not fair, and I'm I'm not performing to this standard. You've done me a wrong by this. And I love that idea, because one of the things that I feel really strongly about is ownership and owning your own self. It's not your fault if I feel bad, even if you've just slapped me around the face. It's not my fault either.
Yeah.
But there's a different way to look at things. And Viktor Frankl, and now I'm rambling all over, sorry. Viktor Frankl was I don't know if you've heard of him.
I have, because Stephen Covey talks about him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does. So for those of you that don't know, he was a psychologist, I think, who was in Auschwitz, Jewish psychologist, and he spent quite a significant time in Auschwitz. And what he taught people around him to do was to understand that between the stimulus and your response, you have a choice. You always have a choice. And in his case, the stimulus was torture and the response was pain and eventual losing of your mind. But the choice was there, and he focused and taught other people to think about that choice. Yeah. And I think it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that reminds me, one of the best podcast interviews I've ever listened to, and I can recommend this to anybody, is with a guy called Mo Gaudat, who's written a book called Solve for Happy. And he's interviewed on a podcast called How to Fail by Elizabeth Day. He's been on there twice. Both interviews are really good. And his whole philosophy, he was the chief business officer for Google X, guy that, was multi-millionaire, lived all around the world, had all these supercars, had everything he wanted, beautiful wife, gorgeous family. And then when he was 21, his son, Ali, passed away, and his whole world obviously fell apart at that point. So he then, as he kind of was going through this experience, at some point started to look at what is the formula for happiness. And he goes into it in lots of detail in his book. But one of the things he talks about is that we have this voice in our head, and he calls it Becky. And it's almost as though there is that's the response voice. So that's the voice that's saying to you or criticizing you, or saying to you, why are you doing things that way? Life is terrible, these people don't like you, or whatever it is that mean voice in your head is going to say. And for him, he talks about treating that voice as though it isn't you, and you then have the ability to make choices in terms of how you react that are more logical, and they're not driven by immediate emotional responses or other very quick gut reactions to challenging situations. So yeah.
I like the idea of naming the inner voice.
It's so powerful. Yeah.
Do you have a name for inner Fay?
Well, actually, just from listening to him, I call it Becky too. And it's funny because I introduced that podcast episode to my other half, and he really enjoyed it. And when we're kind of having, if we have an argument, or if something, we have a fallout, or, the next day, sometimes one of us will say to the other, I was having a moment. Becky was telling me that you don't care about me because because this and this. And it's just being able to disassociate or label that part of you, or that kind of reaction that isn't logical and isn't who you really are deep down inside. So yeah, we both talk about our Beckys.
It's like the alter ego, isn't it? Although I'm sure that's got a medical connotation that I probably should not say, because I don't know what I'm talking about.
No offense to anyone called Becky as well. It's just the name this guy uses. You could name it what you want.
I had a conversation with somebody who's going to come on board and be one of the sort of mental health contributors to Coffee Calm Connection, and we were talking about Coffee Calm Connection and who it's really aimed at. Now, everything I'm driving is, if I'm really honest, it's me as the target market, right? Yeah. So who am I? Well, I'm a working mum of 3. I'm falling off the tightrope every which way. I'm very hard on myself. My inner voice is not perhaps as wonderful as it would be. I'm probably, in terms of income brackets, somewhere in the middle, and I'm, that's who I am. And he said to me, I call that avatar Claire. So I'm going to call my inner voice Claire. So Claire and I are going to make friends. I tell you something else that's really interesting, feeds into that. I'm at the moment doing Noom. I don't know if you know Noom, but it's an app and it's around psychoeducation towards food.
Okay.
I'm constantly on a diet and have been since I was 8.
Ditto.
Well, sometimes I think just accept it, Sarah or Claire. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a whole other one.
Oh, it is. And what Noom talks about is the elephant and the rider. And if you think about in your head there being the elephant and the rider's logical, the elephant's emotional. But actually, the rider can never overpower the elephant, ever.
Yeah.
And if the elephant's going to go in direction X, the rider can sit on top of the elephant and think they're in control, but they're not. They're literally just going along for the ride. So rather than this constant friction between the rider and the elephant, how do you manipulate to get what you want? Well, this sounds awful, but understand the elephant's triggers, understand kindness, understand compassion, and actually sometimes give the elephant the Kit Kat or, whatever it is. But if it's done in moderation and with compassion and kindness and sort of an integrated relationship, then actually the outcome is a lot less angst for all. So I'm going to make friends with Claire. Claire and I are going to go for a coffee later.
Sounds good.
You and Becky should join us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Becky's a bit moody though. I don't know if she'll come.
Amazing. What do you think the function of Becky is? Because there's a reason we are biologically driven. We've evolved to have the inner voice. What do you think the function is, and can it ever be helpful?
Yeah. Well, I actually look at myself as though I almost have two inner voices. So there's the Becky who is critical and likes to point out things that I've done wrong and all the awful things that everybody thinks about me. So there's her. But then I think there is another inner voice that I wouldn't even name, because it's almost like just a gut instinct, or if you're in a really calm place, and this is where all the self-care comes in, that there's actually, I'm a big believer that most of the answers to the questions we have inside of us. And that, again, it sounds a bit cheesy saying it, but I think, as a female in a male-dominated industry, I've spent many years feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, and imposter syndrome, and I don't have the answers, and I need to ask somebody else. I need to check what I'm doing with somebody else all the time. And actually, I realize now that it's just kind of, I guess it's like maybe a confidence, but just a knowledge that I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I know the path I'm supposed to be on. I know that it's okay to fall off it, and to pivot and go in a different direction. And sometimes if I'm really kind of quiet and feeling grounded, I know exactly what direction that is in an instant. And I never had that capacity, I think, when I was in my 20s. It's definitely something that's cultivated over time.
Do you think it comes with age?
Yeah, it does.
Where would you say the pivotal age for you was?
For me, I would say it was probably, I'm 38 now, I'd say it's probably about mid-30s that I started to feel like that. I'm
38 in about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And I would also say about 34, 35 was when I finally felt, and not every day and not all the time, but there was just almost an anchoring somewhere about myself that I was more okay with than I'd probably ever been.
Yeah.
And Claire still pipes up a lot, but there is that anchor that I think is helpful.
I agree. And I think as time goes on, it gets stronger and stronger. And I'm now in a place where I'm previously I would have thought I don't want to get older. I don't want to go into my 30s and all that. Now I can't wait for my 40s because I feel like it's going to be another great decade because I'm going to know more stuff and I'll be more certain about who I am and who knows what I'll be doing and what life will look like at that point. But I feel very optimistic about the future, whereas I think probably in my 20s I would have been more worried or unsure. So yeah, it's a good place to be.
Do you know what's taught me an awful lot? So my other business, which is very similar, same industry as yours, which is how we've done podcasts before, is also very dominated by men in their 50s and 60s. And actually the insurance industry was not my background, marketing, business development, my background, but not insurance. So to have started a business predominantly in the insurance industry, doing marketing and business development in the insurance industry, was massive imposter syndrome in the beginning for me.
Yeah.
And we weren't structured in the way we started the business. And I can remember in July 2019, literally sitting with my husband and sobbing. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've made life decisions regarding my kids that I now can't afford, but it's what they need for their mental health welfare. And I'm just going to have to, stop sleeping. And how am I going to manage life? And I'm a failure at this and I'm a failure at that. And I remember having the mother of all meltdowns that lasted for ages. And I remember, and this I think is where the tools and the resilience that you start to cultivate come in. I remember going, pipe down, Sarah, like you've got a choice to make.
Yeah.
So if your choice is that you want to get to position X and this isn't working, find something else that will.
Yeah.
So let's really start to put some structure in. And that for me was another pivotal moment to go, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can do it. I can. And then trying to find a way around it.
Yeah. It's I was listening to something earlier today and it was a podcast and she shared a quote and the quote was, "The wound is where the light comes in." And it's by Rumi. And that's the whole situation. It's like you have these really tough times where you are in tears and you feel like everything's going wrong and what on earth are you going to do? And actually, by hitting that point, you're then able to start rebuilding and find a way out and be stronger. That's the other side of it. You are stronger coming out the other side of these experiences than you were before you went in. And I look back at like all of those kind of moments that you've had there, like I've had them all as well. And I can almost see like Fay pre that meltdown, Fay post that meltdown. And Fay pre was not as strong as Fay post. And Fay post will go on to have more meltdowns and then we'll get even stronger going forward and forward. So it's, they're kind of gifts.
They are. And some are harder to swallow than others.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right. The Fay pre or the Sarah pre and the Sarah post are different people. But I also think you have a choice in the different person that you are. And one of the things that I've seen sort of in other relationships that I have is this ability to this sounds awful, but to be the victim. And that manifests in itself quite a bitter outlook. So when you go into that hole, it is your choice how you come out. And I think some of that is around ownership as far as you can. And I don't mean owning the fault. I mean owning the choice to how you react. And I think that's a really important distinction and actually underlines an awful lot of what I want Coffee, Calm and Connection to be about.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions for you.
Okay.
What would 38-year-old Fay say to 21-year-old Fay if you could speak to her today?
Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Loosen your grip. Stop trying to act like other people and be yourself. Yeah, that's probably it.
I think that's brilliant. What tools would you give Fay?
Journaling is really helpful, I find. So I do that sometimes early in the morning, and I probably, it's not a daily practice like I think it is for some people. I will go to it usually if I'm feeling not great about things, and that's actually where I think this idea that the answers are inside us comes from, because if I sit down with a pen and paper and just start writing anything, like, I am feeling crap because of this, this, and this, and I don't know what to do, and all of that stuff. And gradually, as you write and write and write, like, the perception will start to change. So I think that is one of the most important things. I also think, so I'm reading a book at the moment called Rest, which is really good. It's about the idea that actually we are more productive if we rest more, essentially.
Who's it by?
I can't remember. So what I'll do is I'll email you, and you can add the notes.
I can pop it in the show notes.
Yeah.
I think journaling is really important. And earlier, what I was going to say was, when I'm in like the worst places, what I have consistently done is emailed myself. And I've got a little folder that's got all of my emails to self in.
Yeah.
And you can see when I've had low points, and I, like you, suffered from postnatal depression but didn't recognize it for the first 2 pregnancies. I did for the third.
Yeah.
I'm a quick learner. And I did that journaling, and you can see periods, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's powerful, I think. And the other thing I was thinking that relates to rest is, and I think especially in if you're in a job where productivity is very important, so like hard work essentially, that holidays are important as well, and taking time away. I mean, I really notice it now that when I take a holiday, day 4 or 5, something like that, suddenly ideas will just start coming to me, and I will have just this rush of motivation and inspiration. So yeah, it's give yourself downtime. In my 20s, that would have been going to festivals and drinking loads, and not really the kind of downtime that necessarily I value now. But to make space for yourself, just to have quiet and calm, and to like restore yourself. I also think, actually, looking back on at that time, one of the tools that I use now is like being alone. I think that's really important, especially as a mum, and in quite a job where I'm interacting with people, be it majority remotely right now. Having time away is critical as well, whether that's getting up early in the morning so you've got quiet time in the house, going for walks on your own, and just not being afraid. I think when I was younger, I was probably afraid of being on my own. It would be boring, or I'd be missing out on something, but I think that's really valuable now.
I think those are fabulous pieces of advice. Journaling and being alone, being two that I've learned over time as well, that really, really help. But sometimes being alone when you're in the deep and dark place isn't a nice place to be.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a good place to be, going back to what you said at the beginning, which is to feel the emotion. Like it's there for a reason. It just wait it out.
Yeah.
If you were talking to a friend who was going through the difficult period in your life that you'd been through, what would you say to her? What would your advice be? Would it be along the same lines as 21-year-old Fay, or have you got any other things you'd want to offer?
Yeah, I would say it's just knowing that the biggest challenges that we go through are hugely and can be hugely transformational. And it feels, if you're going through something difficult, it's probably because you're going through a period of growth, and you're trying to change something in your life, or something has happened externally which is impacting a change on you, and that's going to generate a growth within you, which can be transformative. And I think that, just taking each day as it comes, and like I said, it's looking for, like, finding those things as well that make you happy and prioritizing that, kind of almost giving yourself a little toolkit full of a list of things to do. If you feel low, if you feel down, and just dip into that when you need to, I think is really important. And I think as well, just the action of me talking to a friend going through it, it's to say that you're not alone. This happened to me. It's happened to many people. You feel like if you're in a dark place, if you're having a tough time, you're the only one that it's happening to. But there are millions of people that, around the world that, have tough experiences and come out the other side in a stronger, better place, and then go on to help others. So
I think that last bit's really important, because going on to help others is a real thing. Okay, one last question for you, Faye. What pledge can you give today to your future self of next week, or the week after, or the week after?
My pledge to my future self is that I will have fun every day. That's it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Faye, thank you so much for your time and your positivity and your openness. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. It's been a really good chat. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Your reviews, shares and followership is incredibly valuable to us. If you'd like to know more about our work through Coffee, Calm and Connection and how we can support you, please email us at hello@coffeecalmconnection.org or follow us on social media. Thank you.